Are you from one of these countries and want to get your pilot's license in Canada? Then this video is for you. Welcome back to Aviator Inspirations. I've had this question asked many times about international pilot training in Canada, so I'm super excited to finally bring this video to you. On this channel, I take the mystery out of the aviation industry, so if you're new here, consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future episodes. First of all, why should you even train in Canada? Well, because Canada has excellent flight schools, and the Canadian pilot license is respected and recognized all over the world as an ICAO pilot's license. Canada has optimal weather, and we'll talk about that in this video, as well as the low Canadian dollar. Training in Canada is very cost effective and is estimated to be 30 to 35% less expensive than countries in Western Europe. So we'll talk about that in this video as well. Now, Canada is huge, so before you pick a flight school, you have to decide which part of the country you want to train in. Your decision will be based on weather and cost of living. Let's start with the West Coast. Vancouver is located in the province of British Columbia and is Canada's most scenic city. With the Rocky Mountains to the north, the Pacific Ocean and Gulf Islands to the south, Vancouver is a very beautiful city. It is also the warmest city in all of Canada, with summers at a stable 22 to 25 degrees and winters average at +8. Vancouver is cloudier than other Canadian cities, and it gets a rainfall average of 45 inches per year, but that is mainly during the winter months, and the rest of the year you have beautiful sunshine. I grew up in Vancouver and did all my flight training here, so I'm a little biased, but I also spent 15 years flying in Canada and the Arctic, and Vancouver is still my favorite city. However, with such beauty comes a high price tag. Vancouver is the most expensive city to live in all of Canada, so take that into consideration when making your choice. After the Rocky Mountains, you have Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and they make up the prairies. They are flat, dry, and cold. Winters can start as early as September and last until June. Seriously, I've seen it snow in September and June in Alberta. Fall lasts a few weeks, and the average temperature is -15 degrees Celsius, but they can drop to -25 degrees. The advantage of such cold weather is that you get more sunny days and less overcast clouds. This can help you finish your flight training a little bit faster as opposed to Vancouver that has more overcast skies. Summers are warm and dry with temperatures in the mid-20s, and they are prone to large thunderstorms. The largest thunderstorm I have seen was over 50,000 feet tall in Saskatchewan. Also, the prairies are very affordable to live in. Next, you have Ontario, and the largest cities are Toronto and Ottawa. Toronto is the second most expensive city in Canada, and the weather is not as cold as the prairies, but a little bit colder than Vancouver. Toronto has many suburbs, and there are several airports and schools to choose from. So if you want to be near a big city and have more options of flight schools and airports to choose from, Vancouver and Toronto will be your best options. Then you have Quebec, and although it's part of Canada, it's almost its own little country where they make their own laws and rules, and they predominantly speak French, not English. So if you're going to apply to schools there, be aware that some things could be a little bit different than other provinces, or you might have to do a few extra steps. Lastly, you have New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. The east coast of Canada is much different than the west coast. It's windy, gets a lot of fog, and summers are fairly cool. However, it's the cheapest place to live in all of Canada. Now that you're more familiar with Canada, how do you pick a flight school? I get frequently asked what are the best flight schools in Canada, and the simple answer is there are no best flight schools. Every flight school in Canada has to teach to the same Transport Canada standard. That's why Canadian flight training is at such a high level. What sets them apart is their customer service, whether they are a designated learning institution, and how busy they are. Some schools are so busy that they restrict the amount of students they take a year. I'm going to link the most popular schools to get you started, but make sure to do your own research to find the school that fits you and your budget. Speaking of budgets, The cost for international students can range from $60,000 for the basic commercial pilot's license with a multi-IFR rating, ranging all the way to $85,000 or more, depending if you want an integrated ATPL or a diploma. I'm going to make a whole separate video about integrated versus modular pilot programs, so stay tuned for that. On top of the flight training, you also have to budget living and food expenses, another $20,000 or so a year. So, once you've narrowed down which part of the country you want to live in and you found several flight schools that you really like, what is the application process like? Each school has their application process listed on their website, and each one will have slight differences, but the first step is to always contact the flight school directly. Send them an email, talk to them on the phone if you can, and get as much information as you can before paying them any money. Flight schools are like vultures. You're going to want to deposit and get you signed up as quickly as possible. Your job is to get as much information from all the flight schools as possible so you can make an informed decision. Some schools have a free online registration form that you have to fill out first, and then they will send you all the costs and program schedules. Another very important question you have to ask the flight school is whether they are a designated learning institution. This is very important because in order to get a student permit, you have to be enrolled in a designated learning institution, and not all flight schools are. I will link all the student permit information in the description. This is why I say a flight school needs to have good customer service, because they should be able to guide you through this whole process. That's their job. If they want your money, they should help you get a student permit. That's why it's important to narrow down your flight schools and get as much information as possible, because once you start the application process to get the student permit, the flight school will want a deposit. Something to pay attention to when you start the enrollment process with a flight school: some have deposits that are not refundable even if your student permit gets denied. Also, some schools will accept international students, but they are not designated learning institutions, so they require you to have a student permit already before applying to their programs. Again, I've linked all the information about the student permit in the description, so I'm not going to cover it step by step in this video, but it's fairly simple to follow along on the Government of Canada's website. Once you do get approved for a student permit, you have to start thinking about accommodations. Some flight schools have partnerships with colleges that have accommodations for students, but usually it's up to the student to find a place to live. Then you need to get personal health insurance in Canada, and lastly, your Category 1 aviation medical. You might have to do a medical for your student permit application, but that is not the same medical as a Category 1 aviation medical. Those are two different things. To save you time and money, when you come to Canada to finish your student permit application in person, you can get your Category 1 medical done on the same trip. One last thing to consider is how much time this whole process will take. Flight schools can take up to a week to approve your application and then enroll you into their program, issue you a letter with which you start your student permit application with. The student permit application can take up to 3 months, assuming you did all the paperwork correctly. Also consider the time of year when you will start flying. It's best to do the whole application process over the winter so that everything is ready to go for the springtime when the weather improves. Now, some of you might be wondering, what qualifications do you need to start your flight training in Canada? Actually, you don't need any post-secondary education to start your flight training in Canada. At the very minimum, you should have a high school diploma though. As long as you are 17 years old and you can prove to the Canadian government that you have enough money to study and live in Canada to get your student permit, then that's all you really need. What you do need is a good level of English. The main language worldwide for aviation is English, so there's no way around it. To get accepted to certain flight schools, you need a 7.0 or higher on your International English Language Test. I put the link in the description, but remember, this is a school-specific requirement, not a Transport Canada one. All Transport Canada requires is for you to pass level 4 English in order to get your pilot's license. At the end of the day though, the better your English, the easier you will understand your instructor and the faster your flight training will progress. So these are the basic steps you need to know to start your journey to become a student pilot in Canada. I recommend taking your time. Do your research about Canada, all the different flight schools, get your finances in order, and when everything is ready to go, start the process. Remember, the flight schools have a lot of information as well as the Government of Canada websites, so use them to your advantage. Send them emails and messages and get as much information that you need to be able to make an informed decision. If you found this video helpful, smash like, subscribe for other aviation training videos, and I'll see you in the next episode.